can't believe this, Julia muttered, shaking her head. After everything she saw me go through with her father, she does this? I thought she was better than that. Before I tell you who Julia is and what happened to her, please hit the subscribe button so you never miss out on our new stories. Blake and Stephanie seemed like a solid couple in their mid-30s. They'd been married for 6 years and had a 3-year-old son named Max, a lively little boy with Blake's dark hair and Stephanie's big brown eyes. Blake worked in IT where he managed a small team and brought home enough money to keep Stephanie at home with Max. They lived in a modest suburban neighborhood, the kind of place with playgrounds, dog parks, and families who gathered for weekend barbecues. Stephanie had always wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. Growing up, her mother, Julia, had worked long hours as a nurse after divorcing Stephanie's father when she was a teenager. Julia's life had been marked by exhaustion and disappointment, mainly due to Stephanie's dad, Roger, who was a serial cheater. That experience left a scar on Stephanie, making her determined to create a stable, loving home for her own family. But life has a way of twisting even the best intentions. Blake and Stephanie's marriage had hit a rough patch recently. Blake worked long hours, often coming home too tired to do more than eat dinner and fall asleep on the couch. Stephanie, who spent most of her days chasing after Max or making small talk with the other moms at the park, felt isolated and bored. It wasn't the life she had pictured for herself. She had envisioned a marriage full of excitement and passion, but lately, all she saw were the routines and responsibilities that came with parenthood. That's when she met Chuck. Chuck was a single dad who often brought his 5-year-old daughter, Lily, to the same park where Stephanie took Max. He was tall, easygoing, and charming in a way that Blake wasn't. Where Blake was straightforward and practical, Chuck had a certain playfulness about him. He always had a joke or a story to tell, and before long, Stephanie found herself looking forward to their encounters at the park. It started innocently enough with conversations while their kids played, which then turned into coffee at a nearby cafe. It didn't take long for those meetings to turn into something more. A lingering touch here, a flirty comment there, until one afternoon when Chuck suggested they meet up without the kids. Stephanie knew what she was doing was wrong, but the thrill of it was intoxicating. She told herself it was harmless, that it was just a bit of fun to fill the void in her life. But as the weeks went by, she and Chuck became closer, and the guilt she should have felt was overridden by the excitement of being wanted again. Blake wasn't blind to the changes in Stephanie. He noticed how she dressed up more often, how she seemed distant when they talked, and how she was glued to her phone when she thought he wasn't looking. He tried to chalk it up to stress, or maybe just the monotony of being at home all day, but he couldn't shake off the feeling that something was wrong. One evening, after Max had gone to bed, Blake decided to ask her directly. "You've been acting different lately," Blake said, his voice even but with a hint of concern. "Is everything okay?" Stephanie looked up from her phone, her expression guarded. "Yeah, everything's fine. Just tired, I guess. Max has been a handful lately." Blake nodded but didn't look convinced. "Are you sure that's all it is? You seem distracted." "Blake, I'm fine," Stephanie replied a little too quickly. "You're imagining things." Blake dropped the subject, but the doubt stayed with him. He started paying closer attention to his wife. He noticed how Stephanie's mood would suddenly lift after certain texts and how she was always eager to go to the park, even on days when the weather was bad. Eventually, his suspicions got the better of him, and one afternoon, when Stephanie was in the shower, he checked her phone. His heart pounded as he scrolled through her messages. There they were, texts between Stephanie and someone named Chuck. At first, the messages seemed harmless, but the further he scrolled, the more explicit they became. Blake felt his stomach churn as he read them. There were details, intimate, graphic details that made his hands shake with anger and disgust. He sat there in disbelief for a moment, trying to wrap his head around what he had just read. His wife, the woman he had trusted and built a life with, was cheating on him with some guy she met at the park. He felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious all at once. Blake knew that confronting her immediately wouldn't give him the upper hand. He needed time to think, to plan. But one thing was certain: this marriage was over. Blake spent the next few days quietly gathering information. He took screenshots of the texts, saved emails, and documented everything. But Blake wasn't just angry. He wanted revenge. Stephanie had shattered the trust in their marriage, and Blake was going to make sure she paid for it. He started by calling Julia, Stephanie's mother. He knew that Julia had a low tolerance for infidelity after what Roger had done to her years ago. Blake arranged to meet Julia for coffee one morning, knowing this conversation would change everything. "Julia, there is something you need to know about Stephanie," Blake said, trying to keep his voice steady. Julia's face tensed. "What is it? Is she okay?" Blake took a deep breath. "I found out that she's been cheating on me with a guy she met at the park." Julia's eyes went wide with shock, followed by a look of deep disappointment. "Are you sure, Blake? That doesn't sound like her." "I wish I wasn't sure, but I have proof." Blake handed her the screenshots of the messages between Stephanie and Chuck. Julia's hands trembled as she read them, and her face flushed with anger. "I can't believe this," Julia muttered, shaking her head. "After everything she saw me go through with her father, she does this? I thought she was better than that." "That's why I'm telling you first," Blake said. "I know how much this will hurt you, and I'm sorry, but I couldn't just sit back and do nothing." Julia's eyes filled with tears, but she quickly wiped them away. "She's not going to get away with this, Blake. I'll make sure of that." That evening, Blake confronted Stephanie. He waited until after dinner, when Max was asleep and they were sitting in the living room. Stephanie sensed something was off immediately. "Blake, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice laced with nervousness. Blake stared at her, his expression cold. "I know about Chuck." Stephanie's face drained of color. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb, Stephanie. I went through your phone. I saw everything. The texts, the pictures, the lies. I know you've been cheating on me." Tears welled up in Stephanie's eyes, but Blake wasn't moved. "I didn't mean for it to happen. It just got out of control." "I'm so sorry, Blake." "Sorry," Blake scoffed. "You're sorry now that you've been caught. You weren't sorry when you were sneaking around behind my back, were you?" Stephanie's tears turned to sobs. "Please, Blake, I know I messed up. I'll end it, I swear. We can work through this. We can go to counseling. Anything. Just don't leave us." Blake's voice was ice cold. "There's no us anymore, Stephanie. I'm done. I'm filing for divorce. The only reason I haven't packed my bags already is because of Max. He needs stability, and I'm not going to tear his life apart just because you couldn't keep it in your pants." Stephanie broke down, pleading with him. "Please, Blake, think about Max. He needs both of us. We can fix this. I'll do whatever it takes." Blake shook his head. "Max will be fine. I'm not going to take him away from you, but I'm not staying in a marriage with someone who betrayed me like this. We'll work out a custody agreement, and we'll make it as smooth as possible for Max, but we are done." Stephanie collapsed onto the couch, sobbing uncontrollably, but Blake felt nothing but a cold satisfaction. He wasn't finished yet. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Julia, who had always been close to Stephanie, barely spoke to her after the truth came out. She couldn't hide her disgust at what Stephanie had done, especially after watching her own marriage implode because of similar betrayal. Their relationship, once so close, was now strained to the breaking point. "You're just like your father." Julia spat at Stephanie during a tense phone call. "I thought you had more integrity, but you're no better than the man who tore our family apart. Don't expect any sympathy from me." The words cut deep, leaving Stephanie feeling more isolated than ever. Chuck, who had seemed so exciting at first, quickly lost interest when the drama exploded. He was just in it for the thrill and wasn't interested in being a stepdad or dealing with the wreckage of Stephanie's broken marriage. He ghosted her not long after Blake filed for divorce, leaving Stephanie with nothing but regret. Blake, on the other hand, handled the divorce with a calm detachment. He got a good lawyer and ensured that the custody arrangement was fair, but left no room for Stephanie to interfere with his time with Max. He made sure that Stephanie's betrayal was well documented in the divorce proceedings, not out of spite, but to ensure that he could protect Max's best interests. As for Stephanie, she was left to pick up the pieces of her shattered life, cut off from the support she once took for granted. Her relationship with her mother was in tatters, and her reputation among her friends took a nosedive once word spread about what had happened. Blake's revenge wasn't loud or dramatic. It was precise, calculated, and left Stephanie with the consequences of her actions. And while Blake's heart ached for the family he had hoped to build, he found comfort in knowing that he had done what was best for Max, ensuring that his son would grow up in a home built on trust and respect. What do you think about Blake's situation? Was he right to rise above and put his son's needs before his own? Or should he have fought for primary custody? Let us know what you think in the comments. Thanks